right, here we go. It's another episode of Film Streak. You know, here in 2026, we're in March now as I'm recording this. And, oh, wait. By the way, first up, Houston Latino Film Festival. It's back. It's that time of year. I don't know what else to say. And this year is the 10th year. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen, the films that are going to be shown, the people that are going to be there, kind of regrouping with some friends and connections that I made over the years. Hopefully a lot of people are coming back through for the 10th year. It's going to be big. So, if you're in the Houston area or you're in Texas or if you're a filmmaker, just check it out. Just get to know more about this festival. It's something that personally I've just taken a real pride in getting to know everybody involved with it and seeing it grow over the years. If you can look for older episodes of this podcast, you've seen I've had Pedro on there, who is one of the founders of the festival. He was very kind to let me kind of take part in some of the, the judging or the like selection process of like reviewing films and, giving some thoughts or feedback or votes on those. I don't know how that shakes out. I just kind of watch some stuff and then they do the rest, right? It's interesting to see the mechanics of all that, but check that out if you can, HoustonLatinoFilmFestival.org, or I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to know more. But aside from that, this year has been interesting because I've been looking at, I put together lists of films, like kind of groups of films, and sometimes, as has happened in past episodes, I can't always find ways to tie some of these together. But here are some films that I saw throughout, let's say, the last 6 months, and they just never seem to fit in one group or another. And I'm just kind of like clearing the way a little bit, just kind of doing some housekeeping, get some of these films on the podcast off of my pending list. But let's see, let's run through some of these. We've got The Watchers from 2025, In a Violent Nature, which that's from 2024, I believe. But that one is pretty fascinating to me. It's a very interesting kind of idea or concept for it. Never Let Go, Troll 2, Leave the World Behind, which was also kind of interesting and I feel like a little bit confusing in some ways. I haven't really read much about it, but it's got some aspects of it that are pretty high profile that I really wasn't suspecting. But once I watched the film, I kind of saw who was involved with it. I was like, oh, wait, what? And then aside from that, more recently into this year, Greenland 2, Migration, which I saw in the theaters. Avatar, Fire and Ash, which was, I guess, right at the end of 2025. Scream 7. We can get into some thoughts on that. A lot of these films, I kind of felt like they were... aside from maybe Avatar, Fire and Ash, even though it's got some elements to that where they're seemingly about one thing, but they're also kind of building in some undertones and subtext of kind of deeper issues of like trauma and grief and even some elements of like family issues and stuff like that. And I can kind of just jump around in order, I guess. Here, it's my podcast. I can do whatever I want. Scream 7 was the one that kind of really stuck out to me. One, because I recently saw it, but also there's a thing for this franchise, this Scream franchise, which I talked about, I don't know, last year, 2 years ago, when Scream 6 came out, about how it has changed over the years, and in some ways good, in some ways not. But it's a matter of a franchise basically trying to find longevity, right? And you've seen it all kinds of film franchises where they'll introduce new characters, they'll kind of get rid of old characters, and eventually transform themselves into something very different. And sometimes that works to effect, and other times it's disappointing, you know. I think the one that has kind of been a really big roller coaster to kind of watch it as it happens is the Fast and the Furious franchise, which, you know, I'm on record somewhere. I can't remember where. I think it was an old blog I used to have where the first film was not a fan. And the second film was definitely not a fan, and proceeded until we got to Fast Five, where I thought, oh, wow, this has really turned into something new somehow. And then the bar kept raising, where it's like, oh, this is actually turning into like a legit big budget blockbuster type film franchise. And now, of course, it's jumped the shark. It's really ran out of gas, no pun, but it's become something that is just ridiculous now. And the Scream franchise, I feel like it's kind of similar, you know? The first film, I actually rewatched all of the films earlier this year before Scream 7 came out, even though I just rewatched them all a couple years ago also. But, you know, that's me. That's when you come to a franchise, I just got to watch them all. It's like a completist kind of thing, I guess. And kind of reevaluating them, or, you know, rewatching them, I saw different things in them that I really didn't maybe pay attention to, or didn't even think were something to be worried about, or to give thought to. The first three films, I feel like they are pretty much a unit. Right? You could watch just those first three films and feel like, okay, I've got a full story here. Depending on who you are or when you grew up, maybe you might find one of those three films more to your liking than the others, right? I think for a long time I held the first film as like, that's really where it started, and that's kind of where it ended. Like, that is the best one. The second one, rewatching it, the second one kind of grew on me for some different reasons. The third one, I thought it was clever at the time, because that's like the whole thing goes to Hollywood, and there's like filmmaking elements involved, and, you know, the whole thing of like people trying to make it in that industry and how that's reflected in the film, but it's also a parody of everything that it's showing us. I thought it was really clever at the time, and for a long time, really. But watching it again, I just feel like it feels more like they were grasping for straws on that one. Whatever. The second three, meaning four, which I feel like is really a standalone film. It was an attempt to kind of reboot the whole thing, start it all over, but still have the old characters in it. You know, kind of the legacy sequel before things like Top Gun Maverick and all that happened, where they really figured it out. Now with Scream 5 and 6, they did kind of get it back on track, or on a new track, with all the new characters they introduced. And you could see, it seemed like, okay, this whole thing's going in a new direction now. And here with Scream 7, man, it's just like Damage Control. It's just it's just watching. Like, you can almost just see the actors and even hear it in the writing and what's happening. You can just feel like everybody involved in Scream 7 is trying to fix some things that have happened over the years, especially after Scream 6, with the two main characters, the actors that play the two main characters, just kind of being out of the franchise now. It feels like such a big Band-Aid on everything. And, you know, the way they kind of solve that is, well, we fall back to our original characters and we talk about all the trauma they've lived through and how that carries through time and carries over into generations, you know. You've got Sydney, and her daughter, who is now grown, and you're seeing how all those things that happened to Sydney as a young woman, as a teenager in college, that is all echoed into her adult life and into her daughter's life. It's interesting territory, but I just feel like for this franchise where it's so like aware and it's so knowing about what it is and the sort of the universe that it lives in, and it's aware of what the audience already knows, this film just felt like we're really just trying to fix a lot of things and trying to pretend like some things didn't happen and the audience doesn't know about other things. Meanwhile, also hinting at, well, everybody watching this knows kind of why we're doing this now. So it's a weird mishmash of like trying to be clever, but also trying to fix some things. And ultimately, I don't think it's that enjoyable. It just feels like it's a lot of housekeeping in this hour and a half film or whatever it is. And to the point where, honestly, like it's not scary, it's not suspenseful, it's not even really like intriguing. It's just more puzzling of like, well, why did they even make this film? Why didn't they just leave it with the last film? Now, that said, with everything that's been happening with Paramount, with Hollywood, industry-wise, I could see why, especially Paramount as a studio, needs a giant hit again, like right now. Not that they haven't had some good films over the last few years since Top Gun or Mission Impossible, all those big films, but they need one right now because of all the stuff that's happening with Paramount and Warner Brothers and Netflix and all that. It's like I hate that as an audience, you kind of have to know that stuff of like which studio is involved with which franchise and which film and which filmmakers and all that kind of, it's like, I want to see the art or at least want to be entertained. I don't really want to get into or have to worry about or which company, which global corporation is behind this. It takes away from everything. But that's where we are right now. So, Scream 7, the way I look at it, that is kind of the best explanation for why this film exists. Maybe some people enjoyed it. I'm sure like hardcore fans of the franchise found some cool things in it or whatever, but I just felt like, man, we're off into Fast and the Furious territory now. We're going to space, basically. And I just think there is such a thing as just letting it be, right? Just leave it alone and move on to something else. And so for me, it's like after this one, like I'm pretty much out now, I kind of hit that with other franchises over the years, Star Wars especially. It's like there was a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm done with this. Like I don't care about this anymore. It seems like the bigger news is like why something is being made versus what is it about. And so, this one is, it's kind of a throwaway, I think. I wish it could have been better if it really had to get made. Why wasn't it at least better? Now, speaking of big films, giant films, and hits and studios, there's also Avatar: Fire and Ash, which is also a film that, look, I appreciate all the craftsmanship, all the technology, all the innovation involved with these films, with this franchise. I even I appreciate the artistry from James Cameron, from all the visual effects, the artists that are involved with these things. It's easy to kind of get caught up in it and forget that all of this, I mean, aside from the human characters in this, and maybe a couple of the settings, I guess, but like all of this is created, like whole cloth. It's that convincing, right? And it was definitely a surprise and a marvel in 2009 when the first film came out. And was it 2023 when Avatar 2 came out? it was like cool to see like that wasn't at least a fluke. Like the first one, it took a lot of work, took a lot of time, but it was good. But could they do it again? And they did do it again, so that's great. Avatar Fire and Ash, this third film, it's like you've kind of lost a lot of novelty now. So now it's like, okay, now you've got to really mean something with this. It's got to really do something for me, like in my heart, you know what I mean? And I don't feel like that with this film. There are elements of it that I felt like were emotional and suspenseful, and it had some intrigue to it. You could see like some of the plotting that, you know, this is a much bigger thing. Like this is an entire world that is just being rendered out in front of us, like in big 3-hour chunks. And that's cool to be so immersed in that. And I've appreciated it in the other two films too. But here, it's like you really boil it all down. It's kind of a repeat of the first two films. Like essentially, you know, it's kind of got the same rhythm, plot-wise, structure-wise, of the first two films. It's not identical, of course, but it seems like it hits a lot of the same beats. And I just think for this franchise, if there's going to be a fourth or a fifth or however many other films that are, you know, on the table, if they're going to be more, like you really got to go in a whole new direction with this. Kind of like the Fast franchise, you know, it was really going down one road and then all of a sudden we're off in another lane now. And now we're going in a whole new direction. And you know, I have theories and ideas of like what that could be. And I'm sure that has all been run through that whole process of, you know, James Cameron and his team. Fans and audiences can sure guess what might happen in other films, but I'm sure they've already thought of those times 1,000. So, you know, barring the fourth film or any future films really do something bold, and I mean bold, like with the storytelling or with the characters, I feel like we've seen that we're kind of just going to get the same story over and over. You know, it might be different characters, might be a couple of different settings, might introduce some new characters, but it's essentially going to be the same thing. And that's where I feel like the emphasis on the technology, that's where it can get you stuck. You know, when you're making a film that is so heavily involved with the filmmaking of it, you can kind of lose sight of, like, what is it you're trying to say? And not that these films are empty. They have things to say, whether it's about family or about the environment or about, you know, indigenous cultures. There's plenty of topics it's trying to tackle. But as in terms of a plot, I just feel like we're kind of doing the same thing over and over. You know, and you could look at Star Wars even. It's like Star Wars, A New Hope. It's like you saw like pretty much echoed everything that happened in the first film or in the first few films in the newest what was it, the Force Awakens or whatever, right? It's like, oh, this reminds me of that. That reminds me of that. It's just too many parallels. It doesn't feel like there's fresh ideas in the mix. So Avatar Fire and Ash, I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like it's well done, but I don't feel like I was really that engaged with it. And so, you know, if we're talking about, it's not really a franchise, I guess, but let's just call it that, like Greenland 2. You know, the first film, for whatever reason, man, I really enjoyed that film. And the thing that sucked about it is that it came out during COVID, and it only came out on, maybe it did come out in theaters, but I don't remember it being in theaters. I just remember it coming out on streaming. And thinking as I was watching it, it's like, this is a film I would have loved to see in a theater. Because it's a disaster film at its essence, the first one. and yet it's not. It's more of a family film, and it's a film about the human kind of condition, the conflict that comes out of that when people are pressed, right? Like not just like a group of people, but like the whole world, like society, civilization is pressed into what will you do to survive, or what will you do to make it to safety. And yeah, that was a really interesting kind of approach to take. Because I feel like, we've seen disaster movies where it's like our group of heroes or our one hero is somehow going to save the entire world. That's not realistic. And it's not, at some point it becomes not, it's just fantasy. And Greenland, the first one, I felt like it at least made, it kept it on a human level, and it made its characters, the family in this, it made them fallible. It made them where they don't have answers. They don't know what they're going to do next. And that sort of touch, I think that kind of helps it for me feel more relatable, where it's like, if you're in this moment and these things are happening, you don't know what you're going to do. So that whole thing as a conceit really worked for me in the first film. In the second film, it kind of jumps forward in time. I think it jumps forward like, is it a year or 5 years? I can't remember what it is now, but it jumps forward to where everybody made it to Greenland in the first film. They made it to safety in these underground like bunkers or whatever they are. And now, after some time, people are willing or able to like venture out and see like what's left of the world after it's been destroyed by this meteor or whatever it was. And that's a whole different film. I mean, honestly, it kind of reminds me of the 28 Days franchise in its own way. That one is from 28 days to 28 weeks to 28 years. It really jumps through time. You're seeing different characters. You're seeing the world in different states. And this one, it's very similar, especially to the most recent one, which I'll talk about in a future episode. I saw it, but I haven't talked about it yet. The newest 28 years films. But this one, I just felt like there was something kind of missing about it. Like the idea, the urgency of we have to get somewhere by hook or crook, right? By any means, we have to get. In the first film, it was like they had to get to an airplane, and they got to the airplane, then they missed the airplane, or whatever it was, and then they had to find another way to get to another airplane to get to Greenland. Okay, so that for the audience, for the characters, it sets a target. And then there's a time limit on it, right? Like the clock is ticking. So it really drives the suspense. It drives the whole film. And in this one, I mean, they try to do some of that, but it's a little more of like, let's just see what is outside now. Like the filmmakers are showing the audience what they imagine, or what the world's going to look like, and what's going to happen to people after all this has happened. And there's something to that. I like that. I like that idea. I just feel like it doesn't have the same sort of urgency. It doesn't have that engine underneath it, really, that's like, I mean, there is a plot to it, and it is moving in a direction, but it's not like just charging forward, And it has some suspense, and it has some inventiveness with like what they imagined the world would be like, and what will happen to people. I just think it feels disconnected in a strange way. We got all the same characters. We got, why am I blanking? What's Gerard Butler? We got Gerard Butler as the main character, and Morena Baccarin as his wife. They've got their son with them, who, honestly, I got to say, wasn't too crazy about they recast the son, which maybe that, because of the time or whatever, it made more sense. I don't know. In the first film, I got to say, and I've said it since I saw the first film, is the kid at the time who played the son. I don't know how old he is now, but that kid really connected me to that first film. for whatever reason, it felt like you're watching a child, as an actor, of course, but you're watching a character who is really dealing with it. I mean, not dealing with it, is struggling with it, you know? You can sense like that sort of like childlike fear and the anxiety of just absolute fear, of terror of what is happening. If you're scared as a child, but then you see all of the adults, like all of the working world around you falling apart, what is that like? You know? And I think the kid in the first film really did the work. It came across to me. Like I was scared for that kid. And in the second film, it's different. It's a different actor. It's a different sort of, thing that these characters are going through. So it didn't feel the same. And maybe that's part of why it just didn't really connect with me. I didn't feel like there was true like terror that these people were facing. But it's still well done. I think that's the surprise also, is that these films are pretty well done. I feel like they're maybe more modest in like budget and production and stuff. You can tell like they're working within limits. But for those limits, I mean, it feels like all the money's on screen. Like it's pretty solid. Another film here, one of these, Leave the World Behind. That's one that I feel like it's also a little bit of like a disaster-ish type movie. But the thing that caught my attention was like the people involved. You got Julia Roberts, you got Mahershala Ali, you got Sam Esmail as the filmmaker here, and you've got, of all people, the Obamas as producers. I don't know how that worked out. It's an interesting thing. If I remember, I think it's based on a book. I'm not looking at anything right now. I'm just going off of memory. But the premise is that you've got this family that's vacationing, and Ethan Hawke is in it too, right? And they are sort of slowly discovering or confronted with the idea of like something is happening in the world around them. Like something is wrong, something's off. And I think it's pretty much living in that territory of like disaster film, but you don't see the disaster really. You see kind of the, the ripple effects of a disaster. And, I think the thing that it really struck me though is that it doesn't feel like it was over. It doesn't feel like it was finished. And not quite like, was it A House of Dynamite, where it just stops, but it just feels like it just kind of runs out of gas and it just kind of coasts until it finally just, is at a standstill. I don't know. That was my take on it. I enjoyed some of it. I liked some of the kind of set pieces in it. But then again, it's like when we get to the end, I feel like that's what it was, or that's all you've got in terms of like answers or resolution or clarity even for the characters, not even for the audience. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there. I feel like that's one of those where I'll watch it again like a few years from now. It'll be like, you know what? I get what they were doing. I get it now. Some of these other films, I feel like, Troll and Troll 2, I had seen, I don't know, like the trailer for this or whatever years ago. And I don't remember if they came out back to back. I feel like they were a few years apart. But these are interesting in the sense of like they're playing with history. They're playing with this sort of fantasy element of trolls. But it's also in Europe. So you're kind of dealing with like a sort of a look at another culture and how other people in other parts of the world see, whether it's nature or, how society is kind of encroaching on that. And you see the dynamic there, of like, do we look at nature the same way, like all across the world? Some people don't. Some people look at it more sacred. Some people look at it as more disposable, you know. And here it was just interesting to watch this play out in this sort of fantastical premise of these giant, ancient, sort of mythical creatures, and how modern contemporary characters would deal with this. The visual effects, of course, are like, top notch. It looks solid. And I guess, in terms of that, I guess that's the big thing that's going to draw people. It's like, wow, this is pretty cool. Looks amazing. But the bigger themes in it, I think they're interesting. I don't know if I really end up caring that much in the end. Let's see here. What else do I have here? What did I say? The Watchers, Never Let Go. And these are two films. These are almost kind of a pair also. The Watchers is, what was that, Dakota Fanning, right? And she finds, I forget what she's doing, like a delivery or something in like the woods, like in the middle of nowhere is it Ireland or Britain? Somewhere in, no, it was Northern Europe somewhere. And she ends up in this place where she kind of, she finds like, it's like a room, right? It's just like a building, but it's one room and it's glass on one side. And she finds there's other people in this room. There's like 4 other people here. And once she enters the room, they tell her like, oh, there are these watchers, these, I don't know what they are, creatures, people, whatever, that are basically, they come every day or they watch them all the time in that room. And part of the reason they're there is to kind of keep the peace, to also to survive, because I guess it's implied that if you leave this room, they're going to get you and you're dead. Okay. So there's that whole element of like, what is this? How did this happen like this? But also, how do I get out of here? There's the suspense of it, of like trying to find your way out of a trap. But then there's another element to it, of like what these creatures are and why they're doing this. And it's like, are they monsters? Are they aliens? Are they demons? Like what? And it's explained in the film in its own way. And I thought it was kind of interesting. It is a little bit of like, we are the ones in the petri dish kind of thing, which it's intriguing to think about. It's a novel approach. I think in the end, it makes its points and it's kind of out. It doesn't really linger and it doesn't really give you a lot to think about outside of that. Never Let Go. That's the one with Halle Berry and her 2 sons, right? And they're in a cabin in the woods. And similarly, there's some unexplained reason why she won't let her 2 sons go too far, like venture too far away from this cabin. It's implied like something happened to the world. There was some sort of disaster or some sort of virus or zombies or who knows what. There's something out there that she doesn't want her sons to encounter. So she ties them basically with like a rope around their waist to the house so they can never go too far. And, it lives in that space for a while of like, there's like evil out there. And then there's a point where the film kind of turns. And it tries to say, or tries to hint that maybe there's not evil out there. Maybe this is mom telling her sons this for other reasons, And I feel like we've kind of seen something like that before. I thought of The Village from, what was that, like 20 years ago or whatever? Where you have this village of people and the whole film is set in this village and it feels like this is like in, I don't know, 1800s, like Pennsylvania or something, right? And it turns out it's not that in the end. But the whole thing is like these people live in this village and they don't venture too far because supposedly there's creatures out there that will take you away into the night. And this kind of works in the same way, but it gets to the point earlier in the film than The Village, where it starts to reveal itself of like, what mom is telling us might not be true or might not be the whole story. And so that's, I could see that. It's like, oh, let's take this genre, let's take some of these tropes, and let's kind of rework them. Let's reimagine some of this. So it's intriguing. I mean, Halle Berry is really the draw in the film. The two kids, they do fine. They're fine actors, but their characters are they're kind of shells of people. And I don't know, maybe that's by design, but I just feel like Halle Berry is the center of the film, and there's a point where, how do I say it? Her character, the role changes, and the film isn't quite the same after that. For me, it just felt like, oh, there's something different now, and I don't know how to feel about it. And the last one I'll talk about here, In a Violent Nature, this was one that, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that it's a horror film, and it seems like a very low budget, kind of small production film. And it's essentially a version of Friday the 13th, or some of these like 80s slasher films. A lot of them I watched not too long ago, like late last year. I did an episode on those. But this whole film is told entirely from the point of view of the slasher, the killer, the masked killer in the woods, right? That's like basically just walking around and hunting people down. And that is such an intriguing thing. And for this to be 2024 when this film came out, and to think nobody ever tried to do this before, or maybe they did, but never was this like committed to it, like this, what's the word? Like this dedicated to showing this version of this story. Like entirely from the point of view of the killer. I mean, the entire film is basically the camera following this killer around, or at least from the killer's point of view, right? There are a lot of shots or parts of the film where it's just unbroken takes of camera just following this hulking man, or let's say creature, who knows, walking through the woods, like carrying a hatchet or carrying a machete or whatever, or just walking. You don't know where he's going. You don't know what's going to happen when he gets there. And yet still there's a story to it. You see this character encounter these different people, and there are things that they say and things that he overhears as they're in the distance, or they're around the corner, or they're behind some door. The audio has given us these characters just outside of his reach, telling us what's happening. And so we as the audience, as a viewer, are able to kind of piece it together. Even if this character can or can't, or doesn't even care, we can at least understand what's going on. And I got to say, like, that is such a novel approach. And I think the only thing that sticks out for me is like, you can see some of the limitations of maybe like the I don't know, the budget they're working with, the resources they're working with. It's all well done, but I just feel like it's like just shy of being like top quality, like on par with those 80s films. And maybe that's the point. Those films weren't perfect in those days. They had their flaws, and they had the sort of, you could see the seams in whether it's like the special effects or like the locations. Like you could tell, right? And this film lives in that era. It lives in that whole lane, that whole style of films. And I got to say, though, the thing that really makes this stand out, aside from the whole approach, is like the kills in this film. They are monstrous. If you watch Friday the 13th, or you watch some of those old slasher films from the 80s and those franchises from back then, you know, the whole thing was like, the next film, it's going to be even bloodier. It's going to be even gorier. It's going to be crazier, right? And this one, as let's say the first and probably only film in this story, it goes there from jump. It's like these kills are just diabolical. They're insane. And so seamlessly done. I feel like this is where, whether it was visual effects or special effects, whatever, like this is where the money was spent, because this stuff looks convincing, it looks disturbing, it looks terrifying. But also it's because of the approach, I think. It's because you're listening or you're seeing this stuff from the killer's point of view. So you're like literally detached from anything, any other people, or any feelings for any other people in the film. And it's just like methodical. It's like you're just watching a guy go to work. And like there's no music in the film that I can remember. It's not real showy in terms of like camera work or editing. It's very kind of plain in that way. But that's why I say, like, I think the focus, it seems like for the filmmakers, was really to hone in on the premise, like this way of telling this story. And they committed to it. And I feel like it works. It's very novel, though. You know, I don't know if we saw another one of these, like if I saw another film that was like taken from a total opposite approach, whether like the antagonist or the killer or whatever, and entirely stayed in that person's point of view, I would probably be thinking, oh, this is kind of like In a Violent Nature. It's one of those films, I think. It really sets a bar in a certain place. It puts the flag down, put it that way. It's like, we did it here. And anybody else that does it next, even if it's a different genre or whatever, this is kind of probably going to be what people think of. That's pretty big. That's a pretty like bold claim to stake out for yourself, you know? So, you know, you may enjoy it or not. If you don't like horror films, this is not for you. If you don't like those 80s horror films, this is probably not for you still. If you like something that's just kind of inventive and maybe a little bit artful in its own way, and you're cool with horror, like straight up, like hard graphic horror films, you might actually find this one down your alley. It's a little hard to find, if I remember right. I can't remember where I saw it now, but I had to kind of chase it down a little bit. I think it was like AMC or Shudder. I think it was Shudder. So you may not be able to find it everywhere, but give it a shot if that sounds like something you could be down with. So, all right, let me get up out of here because it's getting a little bit late. But that's this episode for now. If you want to find some of the other films I've talked about, you go to filmstrig.com. You can find old episodes there. If you're subscribed, hey, cool, good for you. Thank you. If not, no worries. But I try to make it easy for you. You can find this Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can subscribe by email. You just get these come right at you. But, you know, aside from that, it's like I do keep a list of all these films on IMDb, so you can see these there. You can add them to your list, or you can find out where to watch them, on streaming services or whatever. It's just something I find. I do it for myself, so hey, I'll share it with you. And until then, that's me for now. Go check out the Houston Latino Film Festival, and then when you're there, go watch something new.